So every day, little Johnny would walk by the same group of hookers on his way to school. Every day, they say, "Hello," and wave their pinky fingers at him. One day, Johnny stops and asks, "Why do you always wave your pinky fingers at me?" One replies, "Because that's how big we think your willy is." The next day, as he's walking to school and the women say hello, waving their pinkies, Johnny turns to them, puts his fingers in his mouth and stretches it as wide as it will go while saying, "Hi, ladies." So a Somalian arrives in California as a new immigrant to America. He stops the first person he sees walking down the street and says, "Thank you, Mr. American, for letting me in this country, giving me housing, food stamps, free medical care, and free education." The passerby says, "You are mistaken. I am Mexican." The man goes on and encounters another passerby. "Thank you for having such beautiful country here in America." The person says, "I'm not American. I am Vietnamese." The new arrival walks further, and the next person he sees, he stops, shakes his hand and says, "Thank you for the wonderful America." That person puts up his hand and says, "I am from Middle East. I am not American." He finally sees a nice lady and asks, "Are you an American?" She says, "No, I am from Africa." Puzzled, he asks her, "Where are all the Americans?" The African lady checks her watch and says, "Probably at work." So two Jews meet after a long time not seeing each other. Abraham spots Jacob's fancy Swiss watch and says, "Wow, Jacob, that's a beautiful watch. Where did you get it?" Jacob replies, "Well, Shlomo sold it to me just before he passed away." Abraham, curious, asks, "And how much did you pay for it?" Jacob smiles and says, "Not much. Shlomo gave me a great deal because I was his only son." So there was a little girl and her mother walking through the park one day, and they saw two teenagers making love on a bench. The little girl says, "Mommy, what are they doing?" The mother hesitates, then quickly replies, They are making cakes." The next day, they are at a zoo, and the little girl sees two monkeys making love. Again, she asks her mother what they are doing, and her mother replies with the same response, making cakes. The next day, the girl says to her mother, "Mommy, you and Daddy were making cakes in the lounge last night, eh?" Shocked, the mother asks, "How do you know?" She says, "Because I licked the icing off the sofa." So a married couple in their early 60s are celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary in a quiet, romantic little restaurant. Suddenly, a tiny yet beautiful fairy appeared on their table. She said, "For being such an exemplary married couple, and for being loving to each other for all this time, I will grant you each a wish." The wife answered, "Oh, I want to travel around the world with my darling husband." The fairy waved her magic wand and poof, 2 tickets for a cruise around the world appeared in her hands. The husband thought for a moment, "Well, this is all very romantic, but an opportunity like this will never come again. I'm sorry, my love, but my wish is to have a wife 30 years younger than me." The wife and the fairy were deeply disappointed, but a wish is a wish. So the fairy waved her magic wand and poof, the husband became 92 years old. So the lady of the house sat on the bed with tears streaming down her cheeks. Upon entering the room, her maid knelt by her side and tried to comfort her. "Oh, Marie," the woman said to her maid, "I have reason to suspect that my husband is having an affair with his secretary." I don't believe it for 1 minute, snapped the maid. You are only saying that to make me jealous. So the pilot was sitting in his seat and pulled out a revolver. He placed it on top of the instrument panel and then asked the navigator, "Do you know what I use this for?" The navigator replied timidly, "No, what's it for?" The pilot responded, "I use this on navigators who get me lost." The navigator proceeded to pull out his pistol and placed it on his chart table. Pilot asked, "What's that for?" "To be honest, sir," the navigator replied, "I'll know we are lost before you will." So Prince Charles decided to take up jogging, and every day he'd jog past a hooker standing on the same street corner. He learned to brace himself as he approached for what was almost certain to follow. 150 pounds, she'd shout from the curb. "No, 5 pounds. He would fire back, just to shut her up. This ritual between him and the hooker became a daily occurrence. He'd run by, and she'd yell, 150 pounds. He'd yell back, 5 pounds. One day, Camilla decided that she wanted to accompany her husband on his jog. As the jogging couple neared the working woman's street corner, Prince Charles realized she'd bark out her 150 pounds offer, and Camilla would wonder what he'd really been doing on all his past outing. He figured he'd better have a good explanation for his wife. As they jogged into the turn that would take them past the corner, he became even more apprehensive than usual. Sure enough, there was the hooker. He tried to avoid her eyes as she watched the pair jog past. Then, from her corner, the hooker yelled, "See, that's what you get for 5 pounds, you tight bastard." So lately I have been unhappy with my wife's mood swings, so I bought her a mood ring the other day so I would be able to monitor her moods. We've discovered that when she is in a good mood, it turns green, and when she is in a bad mood, it leaves a big damn red mark on my forehead. So a little blind girl goes up to her MPM and says, "Mommy, Mommy, when will I be able to see?" Her mom replies, "I'll tell you what. I'll take you to the chemist and get you some special cream for your eyes, and you will be able to see in the morning." So off they went to the chemist, got the cream, and went home. All the while, the little girl was getting more and more excited at the prospect of being able to see again. Once they got home, the mother put the cream on the little girl's eyes, wrapped a bandage around her head, and took her to bed. The following morning, the little girl stumbled into her mom's bedroom and excitedly shouted, "Quick, Mommy, take off the bandage so that I will be able to see again." So the mother slowly took off all the bandages, taking her time, and all the while the little girl was getting more and more excited. Once they were off, the little girl said, "But Mommy, I still can't see." To which the mother replied, "April Fools."
One day in a school in London, a teacher told a class of 5-year-olds, "I'll give $10 to the child who can tell me who was the most famous man who ever lived." An Irish boy raised his hand and confidently said, "St. Patrick." The teacher replied, "Sorry, Patty, that's not correct." Then a Scottish boy eagerly put his hand up and suggested, "St. Andrew." The teacher responded, "I'm sorry, Hamish, that's not right either." Next, a Jewish boy raised his hand and confidently stated, "David." The Buddhist boy proposed Gautam Buddha, and the Muslim boy mentioned Muhammad. However, none of them were successful. Finally, an Indian boy raised his hand and said, "Jesus Christ." The teacher exclaimed, "That's absolutely right. Come up here and I'll give you the $10 I promised." As the teacher handed the money to the Indian kid, she remarked, "You know, since you're a Hindu, I was very surprised you said Jesus Christ." The Indian kid replied, "Yes, in my heart I knew it was Krishna, but for Indians business is business." After a fancy dinner at an upscale restaurant, a couple walked back to their car, a beautiful Porsche Boxster. Upon arriving, they realized they left the keys inside the vehicle. The man said to his wife, "Straighten out one of your hairpins and I'll try to pick the lock." After a good 10 minutes of fumbling, he gave up and said, "Dial the dealership support line. Maybe they can send help." After 5 minutes on the phone, she was told there was no assistance available as it was too late in the evening. The woman asked her husband if he had any other ideas, and he replied, "None yet, but we better come up with one soon. The rain's starting to kick in and we left the top down. They must both be blonde." The guys were all at deer camp. They had bunked 2 to a room. No one wanted to room with Daryl because he snored so badly. They decided it wasn't fair to make one of them stay with him the whole time, so they voted to take turns. The first guy slept with Daryl and comes to breakfast the next morning with his hair a mess and his eyes all bloodshot. They said, "Man, what happened to you?" He said, "Daryl snored so loudly. I just sat up and watched him all night." The next night it was a different guy's turn. In the morning, same thing, hair all standing up, eyes all bloodshot. They said, "Man, what happened to you? You look awful." He said, "Man, the Daryl shakes the roof. I sat up and watched him all night." The third night was Frank's turn. Frank was a big burly ex-football player, a man's man. The next morning he came to breakfast bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. "Good morning," he said. They couldn't believe it. They said, "Man, what happened?" He said, "Well, we got ready for bed. I went and tucked Daryl into bed and kissed him good night. So, he sat up and watched me all night."
Subscribe to Lauren's social media now, or I will weather modify your area so you will have flood for a week or so. Or my name is not Donald Trump.